What's going on, you bunch of heathens? Today we are checking out another Wendigoon video. This one is called the Church Rock Incident, America's Largest Nuclear Disaster. Honestly, love me a good nuclear disaster, love me some Wendigoon, so this should be fun. Original video will be linked down below, so make sure you check it out first. And without further ado, let's jump in.
When you hear the phrase nuclear accident, the first thing that comes to your mind is probably Chernobyl or Fukushima. And if you were to hear nuclear accidents in the United States, then the first that comes to your mind is probably 3 Mile Island.
Actually, no, because for the longest time I didn't know about 3 Mile Island. What instantly comes to mind is the experimental portable nuclear reactor that had an accident just outside of Idaho Falls, Idaho. Kyle Hill did a really good video on that one. And what's funny is because I used to live out near there, I could actually recognize more or less where that was. And that was just super interesting for me to see. So actually, it wouldn't be 3 Mile Island, it was that one.
An incident in Pennsylvania that caused mass evacuations and an entire restructuring of the United States energy program, as well as a further distrust of nuclear energy that's continued on to this day. But what if I told you the 3 Mile Island incident is not the largest nuclear accident in United States history?
I wouldn't be surprised.
As far as the amount of radiation released, it's not even close. And what if I told you the reason you probably haven't heard of the largest nuclear accident is because the powers who were in charge did everything in their power to cover it up? Well, that very thing is what we're going to be talking about. Hello, everybody.
Should be fun.
Today we are going to be discussing the Church Rock nuclear accident. An accident that occurred on Navajo Nation land in New Mexico, the effects and casualties of which are still being felt to this day. In short, negligence and a lack of accountability on the parts of the government and the corporation holding the nuclear materials.
Sounds about right. Like, that really doesn't fucking surprise me. This all sounds about fucking right. Holy shit.
Led to the suffering of thousands, as well as meager attempts at cleanup that are downright laughable. Depending on what source you get this story from, you'll get a lot of different accounts. Some hold the EPA responsible, some hold United Nuclear Corporation responsible, and some flat out hold the mine workers responsible. Given the variety of
I don't know any of the stories, so
to lay out where a lot of my information is coming from.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that'd be useful too, but also for me, it's just I don't know anything about the story, so I don't know who I would blame just yet.
And all these sources I'll have linked in the description if you want to learn more about this story for yourself, because it's one of those stories that I think is very important to not forget. One of which is the 1987 documentary The River That Harms by Colleen Keene. It's a short watch, 45 minutes, and has several first-person accounts of what happened. Another great visual source is the YouTube channel Navajo Traditional Teachings. Wally Brown, the face of the channel, goes into several videos talking about Navajo history and culture and has a lot of videos related to this topic. The book Yellow Dirt, An American Story of a Poisoned Land and a People Betrayed by Judy Pasternak gives an entire perspective of the history surrounding nuclear events in Navajo Nation. And finally...
Dude, all these sound so fucking good. Like, they really fucking do. And so much of this sounds fucking sad.
Max has been a good friend of mine for years and was born and raised in Navajo Nation. He allowed me to have a first-person perspective of some of the nuclear events involved in this story, and pointed me towards some great resources like the Navajo channel that I mentioned a moment ago. I greatly appreciate him, and will show that appreciation by using the most embarrassing picture of him I could find. Radiation and a lack of care with nuclear
That's how you know they're good friends.
Some of the most horrific accidents in human history. Again, things like Chernobyl or stories I've covered on this channel, like the unimaginably painful death of Hisashi Uchi. But those stories
That's a sad story,
too. I think this one is so terrifying not only because of the effect that it's had, but because of how little it gets talked about. So if you
I've never fucking heard about it.
After the ad, as we talk about the largest nuclear incident in American history. As someone who's budgeting for a house and renovations, I understand how hard it can be to keep up with all your expenses. There's nothing more annoying than trying to save up for a project only to realize you've been losing money for the past half year because you forgot to cancel a subscription. Well, I'm here to tell you that today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the all-in-one personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. One thing Rocket Money is great at is quick conveniences, like canceling unwanted subscriptions. Once you connect your bank account, Rocket Money identifies all of your subscriptions in a single list. From there, you can select the ones you don't want anymore, and Rocket Money may be able to help you cancel with just a few taps. On top of that, it can help you with your overall budgeting. It can set budgets that will send you notifications based on your spending, and even come up with saving plans based on your spending habits. Rocket Money can even help lower your bills. With just a couple of taps, Rocket Money can help negotiate your bills for you, from internet service to cable and phone bills. No need to worry about customer service calls. Let the app's negotiators go to work for you to try to get the best possible rate. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features, and they've helped customers
premium.
save over
So how much do I have to pay for
$500
it?
in canceled subscriptions. So if you're looking to take control of your finances today, then it's the perfect time to get in on this offer. That's because if you head to the link in the description at rocketmoney.com/Wendigoon, you can get started on Rocket Money for free. That is right, for free. You can get in on Rocket Money with the over 5 million members who are using the app today, and from there you can unlock premium to get even more features, but for now you can just check them out for free, see if they can help you with your money goals. Again, that's rocketmoney.com/Wendigoon to get in on this fantastic offer today. Thank you all for watching the ad, and thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring the channel. Their link will be in the description. We are back to the video.
Yay!
We're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching.
No problem. I fucking love your
The
videos.
Navajo Reservation, or Navajo Nation, is the largest native reservation in the United States. The nation itself lies within the borders of the American states of Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Navajo Nation itself.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I feel pretty shitty for this, but I don't really know anything about Native American history. Not really much, other than, you know, us constantly breaking treaties with them that we set up with them, shit like that. Other than that, I don't really have any kind of history knowledge on them.
Itself is over 27,000 square miles, which, to put that in perspective, is right between the sizes of South Carolina and West Virginia. And it boasts a population of nearly 400,000 members. And for the Navajo Nation,
that's cool.
Conflicts with the U.S. were there from the beginning. See, back in the 1840s, the Navajo fought alongside the United States against the Mexican Army in the Mexican-American War. And like any good ally, after the war was over, the United States tried to kill them for it. Competition for resources led to several skirmishes between Navajo people and American settlers. Eventually, the United States military became involved and adopted a scorched earth policy. This resulted in several attacks against Navajo groups, most of the time resulting in their fields being burned, their homes destroyed, and people killed in order to make them leave. Eventually, the survivors were rounded up and forced to go to a location that the United States had allocated for them. This event was known as the Long Walk, and
okay, so I do know about this.
As far as 300 miles.
Okay, so I do know about this. So maybe I know a bit more about this than I actually, like, maybe it's not like the forefront of my mind, but maybe I actually do know a bit more about this than I actually think I do.
On foot.
Okay.
Not only did this mean several were forced to leave their ancestral homelands in desolation, but sickness and starvation were rampant, and thousands died on the walk there. Eventually, in 1868, a peace treaty was signed between the Navajo and the United States that relegated this reservation as their allotted land. With the caveat, of course, that the United States was still allowed to build stuff or go there when they want. Because of that, a lot of Navajo history from the past couple centuries has been that of tragedy. And I encourage you to look into those for yourself.
Yeah.
But for the sake of this video, I want to talk about one incident and the series of hijinks that led to it. So, fast forward a bit to World War II. During World War II, the Navajo had significant contributions to the United States military.
Yeah, they did. They really fucking did.
For one, Navajo code talkers were invaluable in keeping United States information secret. See, during World War II, there was always the fear of the enemy listening into your communications. So the easiest way to get around this was come up with a code or language that the enemy couldn't understand. So in the Pacific Theater, several Navajo speakers would work as radio operators, using the Navajo language, or Diné, as a way to communicate while under surveillance.
Which is insanely smart, because the Japanese would have no way to figure out that's the language they're speaking.
So sometimes people will use the word Diné just to refer to the language Navajo people speak, but Diné is actually the word that the Navajo use to refer to themselves. So when they say they're speaking Dene, that means they're speaking their own language. Kind of like someone from England saying they speak English. And this was a genius move because while, say, you used a language like Spanish or Arabic or something to communicate, the Japanese could probably find a way to translate it. I mean, I'm sure they had access to Japanese or Arabic speakers as well. But the United States had a unique resource in that there was a nation that spoke a language within their nation that was not spoken anywhere else in the world.
Yeah,
so
insanely
it was
good.
impossible for the Japanese to translate what the Navajo were saying, and this method of remained uncracked throughout the war. And in the European theater, several
really
Eastern
fucking
Native
cool.
American tribes had similar contributions, but against the Japanese, the Navajo were the main players. However, the Navajo nation would also...
I actually didn't know that they were also used in the, do you say Eastern European nations?
For the Japanese
let me
to
rewind
translate what the Navajo were saying, and this method of remained uncracked throughout the war. And in the European theater, several Eastern Native American tribes had similar contributions.
See, I didn't... Okay, so it wasn't Native Eastern Europeans. No, it was Eastern Native American. I didn't know that we also did this in Europe, too. That's insanely dope.
Against the Japanese, the Navajo were the main players. However, the Navajo nation...
So I've heard about the code talkers, but not the ones in the Europe.
Atomic bomb. During the Manhattan Project, the United States needed a lot of uranium. And the most readily available source of uranium were the mountains within Navajo Nation. So while Oppenheimer was assembling the atomic bombs at Los Alamos, just southeast of Navajo Nation, the uranium for those bombs came from the Navajo Nation itself. And then the two bombs were dropped on Japan and the world was changed forever. After World War II, nuclear weapons and nuclear energy were all anyone could think about. So the United States wanted to get a hold of a lot of uranium as fast as they could. Once again, the Navajo Nation was the easiest place to do that. There were other places in the American West that they could have set up these radioactive mines, but frankly, it was cheaper. As mentioned, Navajo Nation was formed under dire circumstance. The survivors of attacks from the American military and the Long Walk in the 1860s had to start over from scratch. Because of that, over the decades that followed, as
that's a depressing picture.
Went through the Industrial Revolution and the Roaring Twenties, the people within Navajo Nation were still destitute. So, as the United States government began to offer them money, they couldn't afford to turn it down, especially when coupled with the promise that the workers for the mine would be hired Navajo Nation members. So the United States government and corporations began to buy up land and build in Navajo Nation, and build they did. In the 1950s,
I'm willing to bet they didn't really go over health effects either that this might have. Fuck, that's shitty.
There were over 750 uranium mines within and around Navajo Nation.
Holy shit, that's a lot.
Seemed to be the way of the future, and we certainly couldn't fall behind on nuclear weapons with the whole Cold War going on. And for a while, it seemed that the Navajo finally had a consistent source of revenue. And with these new companies coming in, they brought with them industry and infrastructure. For a while, it seemed that finally, the Navajo had a good relation with the United States government. And this time, they didn't have to die for it.
Yeah.
For a while. Now,
also, I was going to fucking say, it ain't going to fucking last, unfortunately. We ain't that fucking lucky. We just, also the government, we don't have a good track history with them, and God forbid we change that.
The world was not as aware of the negative effects of radiation as we are now, but we were certainly aware of some effects. There were published studies connecting uranium mining with high cancer rates as far back as 1929. And at this point, at the very least, we knew that breathing in dust while you're mining underneath the earth is a bad idea, much less if it's radioactive. But if you look at the images of the conditions these Navajo workers were working in, it's hard to find any of them wearing masks or
bad conditions, and just also not telling them. Just like I said,
wearing gloves or washing their hands. And it's because the dangers of what they were doing was never properly
that's a cool picture that they drew on it.
Because of this, the long-term health effects that have continued throughout Navajo Nation across the entire nation are hard to quantify. You can throw a dart at a map of the nation and probably have some story about a radioactive incident. I asked my friend Max just what his experience with uranium was, and he said the following: unknown. Likely experience some form of cancer when I get older. The area I grew up and am from has been affected by numerous extraction processes. The coming hydrogen line will be the next. Shiprock, New Mexico, where I am from, housed a uranium and vanadium ore processing facility.
Oh, that sucks.
With Kerr-McGee initially operating the mill from 1954 to 1963.
Damn. And he just unknown, but I'll probably get some form of cancer later on in my years. That's depressing.
Followed by Vanadium Corporation of America until its closure in 1968. My Navajo grandfather might have brought contaminated rocks home for building use. Many families did this as the effects were unknown or not explained fully. The river we use to farm our agriculture and water our animals, as well as ourselves, sits right below a very large disposal site that has been rumored to leak. My experience is picking up the pieces. The extraction process is over, but the health effects remain for generations to come. There's a spike in birth defects and disabilities that coincides with the uranium boom. Prior, it is said we Navajos did not have that problem. Now special care is a common thing in families with young children. It's the water. That's the worst part. And if you're too poor to move, well, like I said earlier.
Oh, that's fucking sad. God damn, this is gonna be a depressing one, ain't it?
You could spend a career trying to track down all the negative effects that uranium mining had in Navajo Nation and barely scratch the surface. The book
definitely what it's fucking
saving.
saving.
Job at compiling several of these, but even then, it's surely not all of them. But to talk about a single incident that encompasses a lot of the things you see throughout these stories, and is certainly the most sensational because, again, the largest nuclear accident in American history, let's talk about Church Rock. In 1977, about 17 miles northeast of Gallup, New Mexico, the Church Rock uranium mill began production. By the 1970s, the uranium business in Navajo Nation and around it was booming. Between 1944 and 1986, it's estimated that as many as 30 million tons of uranium were mined from the area.
Holy shit, that's a lot.
Nuclear energy was at its peak. The Church Rock Mill was opened and was the largest uranium processing mill in the region. The mill itself was technically just off of the nation lands, but it was bordered to the north, west, and south by Navajo Nation. And there were two mines just over in the nation lands, very close to the mill. As mentioned, the mill itself was the largest in the region, processing as many as 4,000 tons of ore daily, which provided
that's a lot
for about 5 nuclear power plants every year. However, despite this optimization, the mill had a problem. The same problem that every uranium mill in the country was having at this time: what to do with the tailings. And to explain what tailings are and explain how this accident happened in the first place, I need to tell you a little bit about how uranium mining works. Now, there are 2 ways to mine uranium: in situ mining or open pit mining.
I will be right back. 1 second. Alrighty, I'm back.
In situ mining happens when you find a strain of uranium somewhere underground. You run a pipe down to it, and when you find the deposit, you effectively pump it with a solution that dissolves the mixture. Depending on what kind of rock the uranium's in, this could be water, this could be acid. Whatever it is, you get the material down to a slurry that the pipe can then drink back up, and then you take that solution you've made and refine it from there. Whereas open pit mining is the more stereotypical mining that you probably think of when you think of the word mining.
Yeah.
Large excavation sites, tunnels, rail cars. In this form, the pieces of uranium are physically chipped off and then the hard materials taken back to be processed. You can see why in situ mining is more favorable nowadays. Not only is it much less invasive and safer, but it's also way more efficient, because previously, if you found uranium underground, you would have to weigh the cost of mining down to get to it, whereas now it doesn't really matter how small the vein is. You can just shoot the rod down, get the good stuff up, move somewhere else. Well, in the 1970s,
it sounds smart.
in situ mining wasn't really a thing yet, so open pit mining was the way that these Navajo Nation mines went. So at the Church Rock Mill, these hard rocks would be taken in and they would be ground down to very small
it's whatever the
pebbles
fucking
with gravel
background
consistency,
track
and then from
is.
there, the uranium
I keep
elements
thinking
would
I
be
heard
chemically
something.
bleached, or in other words, mixed with some acidic solution so that the uranium particles separate from the rock around them. It's effectively the same thing in C2 mining now does underneath the earth. You just had to take the rock to a mill and then do the acidic process above ground.
Yeah.
The uranium that's extracted from this process would create a material that is commonly known as yellow cake. Called that because, as you can see, the uranium powder looks like cake batter. Which nowadays,
yellow cake uranium.
It's not always yellow. It depends on what acids you combine it with. But at the time, pretty much all of it was yellow. And to this day, people still just call it yellow cake, even if it's like more brown. From there, the yellow cake
it's just colloquially known as that now.
Radioactive, and it is then used for nuclear energy. However, this raises the question: what about all the other stuff? Because think about it, uranium is a radioactive material, and if you know anything about radiation, you know that it's probably not great to be around it for a long time. So all of the rocks and materials that were previously connected to the uranium underground, even after you separate the uranium from it, that material is still radioactive. Not to mention all the acids and other chemicals that are now combined to it that you had to use in order to separate the uranium in the first place. This leftover waste from the uranium milling process is known as tailings, or effectively the tail you don't want left over from the thing that you did want. Most of the time, this slurry of tailings would be like a sludge that can contain as much as 85% of the original radioactive levels. Again, until the uranium or yellow cake is enriched, it's not super radioactive on its own.
That's still a lot, though, especially with the amounts that we're talking about.
It's not dangerous enough to be around for short periods of time. But these tailings have been around the uranium for however long that uranium was in the ground. So in most cases, the tailings have to be treated just as carefully as the uranium does. Not to mention that when the acid or water solution separates the uranium that the stone was around, that acid leftover, or liquor as it's called, can leave dissolved thorium-230, radium-222, or lead-210 in the tailings. All of which, as you can imagine,
all
are
toxic.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
So organizations like the EPA and government began to regulate what mines do with these tailings. See, previously they might just be thrown over a ridgeline or kept in these big gravel piles. And then sometimes,
that sounds very fucking safe.
Off or no longer used, they would use the tailings to refill in those parts of the mine. But as we began to learn how dangerous these tailings were, the rules around storing them got more strict. So in 1977, when the Church Rock Mill opened, the government had instituted a new procedure, something called a tailings pond. Water does a really good job at containing radiation levels. This is why typically nuclear reactors will have their fuel rods at the bottom of a deep pool. So the idea of a tailings pond makes sense. If water works...
Okay, as long as it's actually... But the problem is, it could... Yeah, as long as you do it correctly, I guess.
There, then just make it do the same thing.
Okay.
With the tailings.
I was going to say something else, but that
pit, line the tailings in the bottom
changed
of it,
how what I was going to say.
Water. Sure, the water becomes really radioactive, and don't touch it. But that prevents the radioactive materials from just being in the air and affecting people and living things around them. And while yes, this works in theory, as with anything, especially when it comes to nuclear energy, the problem was negligence. And the negligence began
that's how it always goes.
Church Rock Mill's construction of its tailings pond. So the way a tailings pond is supposed to be constructed is whatever pit is dug out is lined with a solid material. This is to, prevent the tailings from sinking underground and...
So exactly what I was going to say. But what happened? But it has to be built properly so it doesn't fucking seep into the groundwater. And I'm assuming this one just wasn't.
Potentially contaminating groundwater. Or, burying in the topsoil, which is probably a bad thing. Similarly, any border around the pond, like a dam or a wall, is to be constructed of the same material. Typically, this material would have some of the tailings mixed in as well. So say, for example, you were using concrete as a base. The wall that lines the tailings pond is to be made of solidified tailing. Reason being so that the tailings that you keep in the pond won't have a negative effect on the material over time. Well,
okay,
that is
I
not
guess
how the Church Rock tailings pond was constructed.
Big
Rather
surprise.
Than building a dam out of certified materials, at Church Rock they were trying a new, conveniently cheaper way of building a dam by just using ground. A 35-foot...
Yes, I'm sure that won't have any negative effects whatsoever.
...pond was dug out and a 35-foot dam constructed at the end of it. The dam itself being made of, like I said, rocks and sediments. The stated reason for this being that the natural earth from the land will do a fine job at containing the tailings. And while that might have worked, what didn't work was their decision on what to do with the bottom of the pond. If you remember, like I said, these ponds are supposed to be lined to make sure that nothing falls deeper into the earth. Well, after they dug out a 35-foot deep pond, they saw that the bottom of it was composed of silt and clay. And they estimated that this continued underground for about 100 feet. And they decided that's good enough. So they didn't line the pond at all. They just dug a 35-foot hole in the ground, threw a mud dam at the end of it, and called it a day. They figured if the tailings did go down or the irradiated water continued underground, well, it's just like sand or something, so who cares? The reason
why check?
The Church Rock incident is such a good perspective of how dumb everyone was being with uranium at the time is because that really gives you a perspective into how haphazard the operation was. They had been playing so fast and loose with the regulations around these things for years that when it got time to build a new mill, it's like, yeah, we've done this before. Just dig it out. Whatever's down there, it'll be fine. There's an idea of doing things this way has worked so far. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as a matter of fact, things went wrong pretty quick. In December of 1977, the same year the mill went into
quite
operation,
a bit can go fucking wrong. What the fuck do you mean?
Came out and did an inspection on the tailings pond. They observed already that there were several cracks forming in the surface of the dam. This was especially concerning considering that the tailings pond was just upstream and nearby a tributary of the Puerco River, a massive river that runs south through the nation and goes all the way into Arizona. A river.
Why is there no fucking actual oversight for this kind of bullshit? Or for this specific, like, oh my God.
Thousands of Navajo people relied on for bathing, drinking water, and their livestock. So the Army told the owners of the Church Rock Mill, a company called United Nuclear Corporation, that they need to fix this. Another inspection occurs in October of 1978, 10 months later, and they
didn't fix it.
That not only were there more cracks in the dam, but that the previous cracks had just been sealed over. In other words, there was nothing done structurally to repair the issue in the first place. They effectively just painted over the damage that was.
Of course not, because that would cost fucking money. A fucking dipshits.
The reason for the cracks was the fact that once again, this dam was built on 100 feet of silt and clay. Not only a loose material on its own, but a loose material that they have dumped 35 feet of water and radioactive material on top of. So as the ground settled and moved, the unsturdy dam began to crack as it moved with it. They also, on a side note, pointed out that the United Nuclear Corporation had filled the pond 2 feet above its safe level, which, was a debatable safe level in the first place, considering, once again, it is a dam of 35 feet of nuclear water on top of 100 feet of sand, or silt, clay, whatever, something you shouldn't build a dam on top of. But, fixing this would cost money, and we don't want to lose that. So they once again
exactly what I just said
over the cracks and waited for something else to happen. Not only should someone have done something after the cracks were found once again in October, but 5 months after that, they had a massive wake-up call. Because on the other side of the country, in Pennsylvania, in March of 1979, the 3 Mile accident took place. A nuclear power plant had a reactor meltdown that led to the evacuation of 140,000 people, as well as the government calling a state of emergency and treating the entire area as a militarized zone. This was a massive deal in the papers. It led to an entire shift in the United States' outlook on nuclear energy. It went from the hip and cool way of the future to something that should be feared. Again, this was 7 years before
it shouldn't be feared.
3 Mile was one
it shouldn't be fucking feared.
That made everyone stop.
Yep, and it is still demonized to this day, even though 3 Mile wasn't actually that bad. And didn't Google buy it recently? Let me check this. I'm like almost positive. I'm almost positive that 3 Mile Island was just bought. I could have sworn. Right there. It's not what I want. Google 3 Mile Island. Where is it? Maybe I'm wrong in thinking this. Or at least they're trying to at least restart it. Oh, Microsoft. It wasn't Google, it was Microsoft. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are investing in nuclear power. Okay, that's what it was.
And think about nuclear energy. So one would hope that a company like the United Nuclear Corporation, who, and I cannot stress this enough, they dug a hole in the ground and threw nuclear waste in there. You would think that after they got one inspection, right when they started, and there were cracks, and then they fixed that, and then 10 months later, there's more cracks, and then they fix that. And then 5 months later, in March of 79, the largest nuclear incident in the United States at the time, hint, just happened on someone else's watch, and now the whole country.
That's what we like to call foreshadowing.
You would hope that they would do literally anything. Move the tailing somewhere else, slow production on the mill for a while.
You would hope, or at least think they would, but God forbid they spend any fucking kind of money that might... You know, it's not like a big incident will cut into their profits. No, that won't happen. Actually fixing the issue, though, that will cut into our profits. So, you know, that's what it is.
A while. But yet again, they did nothing. Any solution would cost money and time that they could use to make more money. What is so frustrating about these events, where stupidity and arrogance shows its head over and over again, is that it's never those people who pay the bill, right? I mean, that's what the entire uranium industry in the Navajo Nation had done up until this point. Cancer was beginning to pop up sporadically. Children were being born with birth defects. But as long as they could keep making money and no one told them they had to quit, well, that meant they could keep making money. Despite the Army issuing reports that the dam would eventually fail, no one stepped in. There were no additional regulations, no fines. They were just...
I want to know why no one's fucking stepped in.
Inevitably, as it always does with these things, someone got hurt. Because on July 16th, 1979, a little less than 4 months after the 3 Mile accident, another accident took place. At around 5:30 a.m., another previously unidentified crack grew into a 20-foot hole. Seems the pressure of water against the failing dam was too great, and the water simply blew a hole in the dam. This caused thousands of gallons of water to begin flying out of the tailings pond. Witnesses in the early morning hours said that they heard what sounded like a waterfall or geyser, and it was then about 30 minutes later at 6 a.m.
That's how big it was?
Immediately, United Nuclear Crew's emergency teams respond and worked as fast as they could to seal up the dam. But
wow, if only you guys had fucking done this beforehand. It's almost like you had two different warnings saying, hey, you need to fix this shit, but she just didn't. God fucking forbid you do your guys' job. Holy shit.
The water flow could not be stopped until 2 hours later at 8 a.m. Meanwhile, the liquid flew into the Arroyo, an artificial tributary of the Puerco River. Ironically enough, a tributary that was made to supply water to a nearby uranium mine. The water flew down the Arroyo and made it into the Puerco River that once again thousands of people relied on. And it got there just as many people who lived along the banks of the river got up to start their day. There was an emergency dam just beneath the main dam that prevented a lot of the solid material
fucking worst. Oh God.
It's estimated that 1,100 short tons of solid tailings waste and 94 million gallons of liquid waste made their way into the Puerco. Again, liquid that contains things like radioactive lead and radium. And even if the people didn't know what was happening yet, the effects were immediate. Just down.
Yeah, they fucking would be with that much. Fuck me.
Upstream of the mill was a small community called Redwater Pond. Within Redwater Pond, several reports began to surface over the following days of animals drinking the water and falling over dead. There's at least one confirmed report of a little boy wading through the water and then going to the doctor because his feet began to burn.
Oh,
Similarly, several people from
no.
the community attest.
That's so fucking sad. What the fuck? God, this is gonna be a this is just, I already knew this was gonna be a depressing one, but holy shit.
That if they touched the river, whatever they touched it with began to sting. There's also several reports in the months and years that followed of people requiring amputations. Remember the yellow cake I mentioned earlier, what uranium looks like in its raw form? Well, considering that all of these materials had come into contact with uranium, several people noted that the banks of the river seemed to have a thin yellow film. The water itself quite literally foaming with nuclear material. The radiation surge was detected as far away as Sanders, Arizona, 50 miles downstream.
That's
and it's
so
estimated that the actual
much.
effects ended in Chambers, Arizona, 60 miles away from Church Rock and 80 miles downstream. On the day of the incident, Navajo people in the community became suspicious of the river, and people who relied on the water began to seek water from other wells nearby. But within days, as mentioned, their animals began to die and their crops began to die as well. Initially, it seems United Nuclear Corporation kind of panicked. They reported the breach, but between organizations like the EPA and the Environmental Improvement Division, no one really knew what to do. So because of that, for a couple days, they didn't do anything. They knew people were contaminated and getting sick and
yeah, we don't know what to do, so we're gonna do nothing. That seems like a fucking smart thing to do. People wonder why I don't fucking trust big companies or fucking people wonder why I don't trust big companies and why I don't trust the government. It's shit like this. You don't need to fear some fucking shadowy organization. The government already wants you dead. I don't remember which person who I watched said it, but it still holds fucking true.
Sure, some of the people in the community noticed when their hands started to burn, but no official announcement came until dozens of hours after the fact. And sure, if you're right there at the base of Church Rock, maybe you came in contact with the river and realized it was bad for you. But people 2-3 miles further downriver, where the effects weren't as immediate, went on as if everything was fine. United Nuclear Corporation simply waited to be told what to do instead of, taking any responsibility for the lives they've now ruined. After a couple days, the Bureau of Indian
No, because that'd be
Affairs
too
and
fucking
the
easy.
Health Service began to warn Navajo people about the dangers of drinking the water. This was mostly done by going door to door and letting people know to stay away from the river, but again, that's not exactly all-encompassing. And even
No,
if
it's
you did
not,
get
and it's
that
also
message,
slow.
like, okay, well, I guess I'm not drinking water until someone gives me some. Another day or two later, the Environmental Improvement Division of New Mexico showed up and began to issue warnings. They did this by using radio broadcast and signs placed near the river telling people to stay away from the water. However, in their infinite wisdom, both the signs and radio messages were in English. And English
Oh my
was
fucking
not
God.
commonly spoken, especially around the area downstream from the Church Rock Mill within Navajo Nation. As mentioned, Dene is the primary Navajo language, and a lot of people were not bilingual at this time. I asked Max about this to clarify again as someone who lives in the region, and he said, "It was not until my mother's generation that many Navajos became bilingual. Prior to that, the elders of the previous generation were mixed, some traumatized to speak the language from boarding schools. Boarding schools and off-reservation Indian dormitory schools in Oklahoma and California were common for Navajos to be sent to as children. I believe it is written into our 1868 peace treaty, which is what we've operated under as a tribe since. My generation, language is almost decimated." That's how.
Yeah. Those dormitories weren't good either. So we, quote unquote, had to teach the savages civility or some bullshit like that.
How short of a time it took due to the increase in technology in my
because
opinion.
God forbid they
Max
fucking
is my
believe
age,
or
by the
speak
way, so his
believe
mother
something
would have
else.
been a child at the time this incident took place.
God believe they believe in something else or speak a different language than us.
After
For fuck's
criticism
sake.
about this, they took down the signs that were in just English and added a version that incorporated Dene. But again, at this point, you're nearly a week removed from the accident.
Too little,
The
too late,
effects are
motherfuckers.
already being felt, and still, people don't have water. In summarizing these early stages in Yellow Dirt, Judy Pasternak says the following. Some 93 million gallons of radioactive liquid poured from the pond into the arroyo, and from the arroyo into the riverbed. The water, filled with acids from the milling process, twisted a metal culvert in the puerco and burned the feet of a little boy who went wading. Sheep keeled over and died, and crops curdled along the banks. The surge of radiation was detected as far away as Sanders, Arizona, 50 miles downstream.
Oh my
The
fucking
Indian Health
God.
Service and the state urged Navajos not to drink the water nor enter it, nor let their animals do so, anywhere downstream from the spill. But the people by the puerco didn't have many alternatives. United Nuclear distributed 600-gallon bottles of clean water, but the Church Rock chapter calculated that more than 30,000 gallons a day were...
Yeah, 600 gallon. Yeah, this is our mess, but we're also, and you're in a desert too, so it's not like you can just go to another water source. So, hey, this is our fuck up. We're gonna distribute this, but we're not gonna actually give you however much you needed. So, fuck you guys. You guys are on your own.
were needed. The 3 community wells serving Church Rock, regulated by the Indian Health Service, were useless. One at the Church Rock School had already been closed, having been flagged just the previous month for high levels of radium and alpha particles. The 2 others contained water with high iron and bacteria levels. Then there were 5 shallow wells along the river owned and maintained by the tribe, marked by metal windmills that turned to bring the water up. These were in various states of disrepair and perhaps at risk. Indian Health Service asked the tribe to fix them and advised residents that these, quote, are not expected to show any contamination, if at all, for several years. When it was all over, after the company was pressured to increase its water deliveries and build some livestock watering tanks...
God, they had to be pressured into that. What the fuck? Oh my... What the fuck is this, cyberpunk? No, because in cyberpunk, they wouldn't fucking give a fuck. They tell you to kick sticks.
Like crystals with a yellowish tinge along the bottom of the drying wash. These salts were new. They had never shown up after past flooding. Eventually, the United Nuclear Corporation sent their own workers, again Navajo people that can actually speak the language, door to door to make sure everyone knew to stay away from the river. Again, a task that was easier said than done. Navajo Nation members urged the at-the-time governor of New Mexico, Bruce King, to declare a state of emergency. Similar to what happened at 3 Mile Island, it allows the government to be much more hands-on and immediately clean up and provide aid for the region. But Bruce King never did. And
no, because that would hurt his career. That would definitely hurt his career.
Incredibly frustrating. For years, nothing happened. Despite this affecting the homes and safe drinking water of an estimated 1,700 people, they just let it be. Go get your water somewhere else, and if you can't and your animals are dead and there's nothing you can do, sorry. But not even that, not even a sorry.
No, you're shit out of luck. Fuck you guys.
There were investigations that followed, sure, but their conclusions were laughable. In the Redwater Pond region, people were dissecting animals that had killed over after drinking the water, and upon opening them up, several of their organs were visibly yellowed. A study was conducted on the cattle, and a conclusion given that it should be fine if cattle is not dependent on for food. To look at people whose entire life is like agriculture.
Yeah, because, what? Totally. Not dependent on for food. Yeah, that's why I fucking have these. They're just pets. A people whose entire thing is agriculture and livestock. Yeah, we're totally not dependent on these guys.
Farming, and they raise the animals they eat, and be like, well, I mean, that's fine as long as you don't need these things. At the beginning of the puerco where the tailings dam broke into, early estimates show that the radiation levels in the water was 7,000 times the allowable limit. And regardless of all of this, Navajo people were just told, get your water somewhere else, figure it out. Oh, what's that? All the wells in the community are bad because of the 20 years of mining we've done right here? I guess figure it out. Not to mention that through all of this, United Nuclear Corporation was doing everything they could to point blame somewhere else. As a matter of fact, they outright denied the claim that any livestock died from drinking from their, again, 7,000 times the safe limit, irradiated river. The vice president of the Navajo Tribal Council at the time, Frank Paul, is quoted in the investigation as saying, somehow, United Nuclear Corporation was permitted to locate a tailings pond and a dam on an unstable geological formation. Somehow, United Nuclear Corporation was allowed to design an unsafe tailings dam not in
It's not somehow. It's they chose to. No one was gonna fucking stop them.
conformance to its own design criteria. Somehow, United Nuclear Corporation was permitted to inadequately deal with warning cracks that had appeared over 2 years prior to the date the dam failed. Somehow, United Nuclear
It's a bunch of
Corporation was
fucking
permitted to continue
somehows.
a temporary dam for 6 months beyond its design life. Somehow, United Nuclear Corporation was permitted to have a tailings dam without either an adequate contingency plan or sufficient men and material in place to deal with the spill. Somehow, United Nuclear Corporation was permitted to deal with the spill by doing almost nothing. And then you want to know the craziest part? I mean, there's so many, but one of them, initially,
Yeah,
the
let's hear
people
it.
affected asked for $25,000 each in compensation, which for possible lifelong damage and generational damage and losing access to safe drinking water, $25,000 is like child's money, but okay.
Child's money, but it's what they asked for. Okay.
United Nuclear Corporation not only denied the $25,000, but denied that they needed to pay out any large sum of money because the employees that were working there and were affected by this spill never requested workers' compensation. And the actual amount that they ended up paying
No
out
fucking way.
was about $2,000.
Each of the families initially sought $25,000 in damages, but they eventually settled for about $2,000 each. In fact, the Navajo people signed a release that forfeits their right to sue UNC in the future.
Yeah, because I'm sure as fuck they weren't strong-armed into this.
This agreement may apply even if they experience an increase in cancers and birth defects.
With a total fine, effectively, an out-of-court settlement with the Navajo Nation of $525,000.
Yeah,
But
ruining
not only
an entire ruining multiple families' fucking lives. More than likely killing a bunch of people. Health defects for generations. $500,000.
only that, this all happened in July, right? Well, a couple months later, they began repairing the dam that caused all this in the first place. And once
Yes.
the dam was remade, on November 2nd of the same year, the mill opened back up again. And yes, continued to use the exact same tailings pond. It's like fake, right?
You guys can't
Like,
be
if someone
serious.
wrote this level of like evil and negligence.
No,
from the
this
government
this
and
shit
companies
sounds
to the story, I
cartoonish.
would call it hokey. Too unbelievable.
This sounds
But these
cartoonish.
people exist and they got away with it. What's so heartbreaking about it is it's not even just them. Like, it's not even just being like, oh, I can't believe there's this one corporation that was that evil. The reason they got away with all of this and the reason that it got shoved under the rug as much as it did is because it was happening everywhere. Like, if another dam somewhere on Navajo Nation had the same problem, same thing would have happened. They've been playing it fast and loose for 30 years at this point, the entire uranium industry. So why would this be a problem? It's so frustrating because it's like with
That's
other
depressing to
incidents,
think
like
about.
3 Mile Island or Fukushima or something. Something goes wrong and everyone acknowledges that it goes wrong.
Yeah,
Because
I've
they know
never
they can
fucking-
get away with it.
Yeah,
So it
I've never
happens and
fucking
they're
heard of
just
it.
like, so, and the disgusting level of demeaning people affected by this. Several of the people who went to the hospital because they were complaining of burns were written off as heat stroke. Evil people got
Oh,
away with
no.
being evil because there was a lot of evil people to hide behind. Eventually, considering United Nuclear Corporation was, again, continuing the mine, they were pressured to clean up the area, so they assigned a bunch of workers to take shovels and 55-gallon drums and just scrape up some of the riverbank, you know, because that'll fix it. All in all,
Totally.
2 years too late, they managed to gather about 3,500 barrels of waste off the shores of the Puerco River, which is estimated to be about 1% of the affected area. So great job, team. One bright
Y'all are
influence in the
fucking
midst of this
dipshits and
was
useless.
a United States politician named Stuart Udall. Udall was the Secretary of the Interior under President Kennedy. And when he found out about all this, he wanted to do something about it. So in 1983,
Oh, what'd he do?
he decided to try to get this case taken to the Supreme Court. His son was a lawyer that helped with the case. His wife
Tried. Notice he said tried. It didn't. Nothing came of it.
Wife got a Navajo artist to contribute $25,000 from one of his art pieces in order to raise enough money for the people affected by this incident to be able to show up at trial. It seemed that he really had a heart for what he was doing. He wanted these people to get some justice. And in 1983, there was a 3-week trial where they tried to fight to get it taken to the Supreme Court, but it never made it there. It seems ultimately the judge came down to the conclusion that it was a tangled mess and it's not really sure who's to blame. I would argue everyone, but the United Nuclear Corporation was supposed to be in checks by the government who weren't doing anything. And the federal government claimed that the Navajo government was supposed to be looking over a bunch of this stuff.
Legal bribery, lobbying, shit like that, and then kicking the can to someone else because we don't want to have to deal with it. Sounds like every other fucking story.
Their hands were tied. Everyone was pointing at each other, and it seemed that in order to put someone on trial, you had to put everyone on trial, and that was too much, I guess. However, on another bright
I would have
side,
fucking taken that.
The VA was starting to barrel down on, you know, treating people in Navajo Nation like inconvenient guinea pigs. And in 1982, amidst the controversy, the Church Rock Mill had shut down. But it was just one of many mills across Navajo Nation.
Yeah.
And the Church Rock incident is so big because it was one moment where the dam quite literally burst. But like when Udall tried to take this case to court, he wasn't just talking about Church Rock. He was bringing forward miners who had cancer and widows who had lost husbands and sons. What was happening was bigger than just the United Nuclear Corporation. It was bigger than just Church Rock.
It was it had to deal with the whole situation on Navajo land. All of it. Oh, thankfully. See what he says.
Seems that because of people like Udall trying to get these cases brought forward, and things like Church Rock, as tragic as they were, made people wake up. In Udall's hearings, it was brought up, quote from Yellow Dirt, that the Navajo uranium miners averaged cumulative exposures that were about 44 times higher than the levels of those at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 2 bombs that, again, the very uranium that was used was taken from the Navajo lands. Throughout the rest of the 80s, mostly because of, again, events like Chernobyl and a growing disdain towards nuclear energy, mills and mines throughout Navajo Nation began to shut down. While some of them safely removed their dangerous materials and closed up in a good way, others simply dropped their pickaxes and left everything there. To this day, there are over 500 abandoned mines across and around Navajo Nation, several of which still containing very dangerous material. And as for the effects of things like Church Rock and the other uranium
if it weren't for the fucking radiation, those would be really fucking cool to explore.
mines had, I mean, it's plain to see.
To be fair, I would also love to fucking
by the mid-1980s,
explore Chernobyl and shit, but I can't. It's too dangerous.
Examined the tissues and bones of uranium miners and millers to follow the alpha-emitting variations of uranium and thorium. They found concentrations not just in the lung, but also in the liver, kidney, spleen, gonad, and heart. They also found the isotopes in ribs and vertebrae and sternum. The accumulations vary dramatically from tissue to tissue, from bone to bone, and among the dead men. Perhaps these distributions accounted for the disturbing findings in a review of 259 dead miners. As expected, lung cancer
that's so high.
56 times as high as the general population.
What the fuck?
Stomach cancer, too, fit the pattern that Ald had discovered, at 82 times the rate for males 55 to 70.
Holy 82? 82!
79 years of age. But there was more. The mortality rates among these miners for cancers of the prostate were 45 times higher, of the pancreas 78 times higher, of the liver 263 times higher, and of the bladder 68 times higher.
Oh my God.
The New Mexico Tumor Registry expressed concern over possible associations of mining with pituitary and kidney cancers. Non-cancers, but nonetheless serious health impacts, were also a concern. The PHS linked high radon levels in the mines to an increased risk of lung diseases, tuberculosis, fibrosis, silicosis. Uranium was known to damage kidneys because
there's so many. I knew there would be, but holy shit, and nothing was ever really done about it. Oh my
of its
God.
chemistry as a heavy metal rather than its radiation. The March of Dimes funded a study of birth defects in the Shiprock area and found that the
March of Dimes, March of Dimes. Why do I know that? Isn't that a... I believe... that's a... Like, you raise money by walking? I believe? Yes, I've been to one of these. Where you, the whole point was you could walk, I don't remember how they did it, but it was like, oh, you walk around a certain amount of times and, you know, you would donate however much, certain amount, however much, whatever. Yeah, I remember March of Dimes events. I've seen them quite a bit. They were actually fairly big in the fucking... in the town I used to live in a while ago. Oh, what? When I was young. Damn.
increase had a statistically significant association with the mother living near uranium mine or mill. But the author urged caution because of the small numbers involved and the need for more study. It's one of those things that officially on paper, no one died in the Church Rock incident. But we know that's not true. And again,
yeah,
it's
that
hard to
isn't
separate
true.
just the Church Rock incident from all the other incidents that occurred at the same time. United Nuclear Corporation was bought out by General Electric, and similar to all the other companies, no one paid for what they did. Well, they paid $525,000. So I asked my buddy Max for his thoughts on all of this, and here's some of what he said. I've been to the Church Rock spill once, and they've been at it as a community to address lingering effects and issues. Knowing contamination breaches historically, Navajo Nation government and other entities continue to pursue extraction, exploiting, contaminating, etc. for money. Families in impacted community areas are having health issues. They've been advocating to remove what's left of apparently low-grade uranium remnant ore from their area. I think recently it was approved finally for removal, but others...
God,
were
it took this
concerned about
long?
removing, hauling away to other areas, even another tribal community area near Blanding, Utah. As he mentioned, in years previous, organizations like the EPA have began to implement plans in order to start getting the uranium or radioactive materials out of there. That tailing pond is still there. It's still just sitting there. And until something official is done to get those materials out, who knows? Could break again. There's other places where there's just flat out giant mounds of dumped waste. Not even an attempt to throw water over it for whatever.
Wait. Look how close it is to people. Look how close. This is very obviously like a community center or something. And it's just sitting out. Oh my God, this is horrendous.
Dumped waste. Not even an attempt to throw water over it for whatever that did. And if it wasn't frustrating enough, when I was reading about this story,
Can you imagine
I was
the
reading about
windstorms
this
with
year
it?
in 2025, as organizations are trying to remove radioactive waste from the area so that, you know, people quit dying and quit getting cancer and quit having birth defects. So people can stop being afraid to have children.
Yeah, because it's not like they have a fucking... They can't move anywhere else. This is where they are. This is their home. This is their nation. They can't go anywhere else.
Navajo Nation members were protesting new legislation that allowed other uranium companies to move uranium product through the area. That's
Fuck
right,
off!
now that
No.
nuclear energy is back on the market. Well, we don't want to drive around Navajo Nation, so they won't care if we cut through it. You know, these people may have serious fears and generational problems because of this stuff. It won't hurt them to look at a few trucks drive by with it every now and then. For areas like Redwater Pond, most of the people got up and left. Several of them moved to Gallup, New Mexico, off of reservation lands. For others who have lived there the whole life,
I've been to Gallup.
maybe a group of people who got to that area in the first place because they were forced to go on a long walk don't want to go on a long walk again. In Max's closing thoughts, he said to me, "Some might consider it downright intentional. Some tribe members believe the war rages on and the tactics have changed. Violence has been one-sided for so long, it makes you wonder about the spiritual warfare side of things, of which fellow Navajos do believe that's exactly what's going on. I think John Trudell quotes it best. Quote, I've heard a lot of people talk about the theoretical nuclear war. What if it ever comes? Well, the nuclear war is here. That's what the dead Navajo uranium miner is. He's a victim of that war. That's what the stillbirths and miscarriages are on Pine Ridge, where the radioactivity has reached into the water. And nowadays,
Yeah, that's actually a good fucking point. It's all what if it comes? Technically, yeah, it already is, because you have people who have died of negligence from the getting the nuclear power, the nuclear materials to build the bombs and nuclear sites. So it's already here. There's already been casualties from it. Not even from the weapons themselves.
it is more encouraging because there are organizations, there are people that are trying to make things better. It makes me infinitely furious that the people who were actually responsible got away with it. And now any funding that can actually get the materials they left behind out of the region will have to come out of public funds or taxpayers' money. But that stuff needs out of there, regardless of the cost. So many of these corporations...
I wonder if... I mean, I don't think they could, probably not, but I was going to say... So they had to sign a deal saying they couldn't sue... After the $2,000 settlement, they couldn't sue UNC again. But now that UNC is bought out by GE, could they technically sue GE? I would assume not, because if it could, I'm sure they would have already done it, but that was instantly my thought process.
It's like the United Nuclear Corporation or the government in general was hopeful that we'd all just forget about it. That all the people there
we don't forget.
Shut up and walk away or die off. And I'm glad that there are some people who haven't forgotten about it.
Never fucking forget. We do not forget.
How long ago it was are willing to say, yeah, let's do something now. It may be too little too late, but let's do what little we can. Max also wished to share Matthew 7:23. It's in a sermon where Jesus is talking about what God will say on Judgment Day. And the verse says, quote, "And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity." He knows how to get me going. And ultimately, yes, history is tragic. I'm glad that now there are plans underway. I hope that it'll take years, but within years, whatever it is, we can do something to hopefully make the next several generations not suffer the mistakes of our past ones. When the dam initially broke, United Nuclear Corporation estimated that about 1 curie of nuclear radiation was released, when in reality, it was about 46. To put that in perspective, 3 Mile Island...
It's a big fucking difference.
13. The largest nuclear incident in American history, and the third largest of all time, again behind Chernobyl and Fukushima, seems nearly forgotten. But
yeah, no one talks about it.
Entire video,
holy shit.
You haven't forgotten it.
Now I fucking won't. I won't anymore because of this video, because I've never heard of this.
Whatever way you can, sure, the past is awful, and yes, atrocious things were done. I am merely the storyteller. I just knew about this whole thing and had to tell someone. So I'm glad you're here to listen. And above all else, I just want to say thank you for watching. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for fucking telling.
My friend Max.
Thank you for telling us about it. Yeah, definitely giving this bitch a like. Definitely. Thank you for fucking making the video, because now this has reached at least 1.64 million people. 1.164. Like, this has reached so many more people because of you. Thank you for fucking doing it.
Let me ask him stupid questions about this whole thing. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure he's the one that told me about Church Rock like several years ago. I was talking something about Chernobyl, I think, and he was like, oh, kind of like, you know, the Church Rock one in Navajo Nation. And I was like, what? No clue.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure he told me about it in the first place. So this video wouldn't be possible without him, much less the actual insight into stuff that happened. So thank you very much for that. Again, I'll have sources and resources for this linked in the description if you're interested in learning more about it on your own. With all that said, I believe that should do it for now. But I just want to say thank you for watching. Hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Feels weird after all that to do a bye thing. I'm sorry I told you this, but also not sorry because you're supposed to know it.
Yeah, don't be sorry.
I guess. Bye.
Bye. That was a good one. That was Wendy Goon, the Church Rock incident. You need to fucking check out the original. Make sure you check out the original and give them some fucking love, because holy shit, that was good. I'm going to mention again, check out the original. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more of me. And until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.